Okay, we're rolling here. So I will just share my screen now. All right, so we had a good look at the major project system, how you enter information in that, how the macro is created, and you would run it in that project subfolder. And it, under using that batch file, brings the database back into your main provincial model folder, all ready to run. So you can use that that system to add projects if you want to do conduct shocks using the major project system. But to finish it off, I mean, unless you're running a separate solution system, you're just going to overwrite your forecast. So what we develop here in order to not overwrite your forecast and have what we call a shock forecast is our ASOL shock macro. So you can see that by editing your macros. Not only do we give you guys the ASOL macro that solves the model normally, I guess is the way to say it. We also include the ASOL shock version of that. And we'll just take a quick look. So I was to put, here's the ASOL macro. And you can see here, I've set up the shock for this afternoon. And if I keep the rows aligned, ignoring the fact that the notes aren't at the top, you can see that they're exactly identical, except for when you get to the bottom here, these last lines of code. And as you can see here, we have the only difference being is under this shock extension macro command at the very bottom of the screen. Here, we would also call the database instead of calling it MNF 202, we're calling it MNF 202 shock. So we create that base, we open that base, and then we do what's called a shock extension. You can put whatever extension you like on. We usually use the underbar S because you can then just, if you're obviously standardized here, you can develop tables to view the shock and the base case versions of every variable. So what the shock extension does, it puts on the underbar S as an appendage to every single variable coming out of the model, being unloaded from the data set, so that you'll have not only your GDP MN variable to look at, you'll have your GDP MN underbar S as in the shock case. So that's all this system does. So basically, if you were to set it up, if we sent you the file and somebody forgot to update, put in the new year, for example, that's all you want in it. It should be from here down, should be the exact same code, no difference. And then all you want is the fact that you just want to have a different database being opened, and you want to be putting that extension onto the variable names when you unload the data set. So we can use that. Why don't we do some basic shocks here? Now I know you guys don't all have your models set up, so hopefully you learn by doing, me doing for you here. So what we can do as an example is why don't we just perhaps put in a second food plant or something like that, unless you guys have any other ideas. Anything you'd like to add here? Any suggestions or what we can do for a shock, or just do something relatively simple? That way we can just sort of copy one of these already pre-existing projects. So all I have to do here is take a copy of that. I'll insert it on this line. Let's just make it simple, make it $1 billion plant. We'll say it's being constructed from 2021 to 2024 or something like that. Call it test facility or something. Don't worry about that. I'm going to do an annual data frequency, and we can put the deflator as high as possible so it gets deflated. Or you know what, make it easy. Let's not deflate it, just so you can see the one-for-one investment dollars going in. How about 1,000 construction jobs come out of that? And what do you guys want? 200 workers? 250 workers? Something going on with my computer. I can't edit the file suddenly. What's going on here? Not sure if this is a Teams issue or what.
What would happen if you click enable content at the top there? Is that the issue?
I don't think so.
No, okay.
It could be. It's weird. Something to lift. I move it off to my other screen here. I have two monitors going, so no, it's some bug.
Maybe sharing the screen is causing issues. I feel like I might have had this before with sharing Excel.
Right. I think you're right. There we go. I closed another file and it seems to work now. Okay, so I put the operations jobs. Let's just leave the rest the same. We'll be estimating GDP using the productivity method, or the employment times productivity method. So I'll just save that, and we can call it, in this case, let's call it mnproj 202 shock. We'll call the macro that's generated by the system. So you can just enter that information here in cell C2. So opening this up now, we list our stuff. Create selected. So that should have generated our project macro. And for some reason it's not there. Where am I? This whole thing may not be working. It's weird.
There it is at the bottom, isn't it?
Yeah, no, you're right. It's showing up in the program. I'm not seeing it. It's like I have this open in the wrong folder or something. Let me just check this.
It's not the same. Yeah, it's not the right folder that you're showing us.
I might be. Yeah, that's what it is.
It's a drive. You're on your. It's a
I know what I did.
Folder. Yeah.
I just destroyed our actual project spreadsheet. So hang on. 1 sec. I'll just grab the file out of there, even though I can't open it. You know what? Let's forget it. I'll fix it after. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
I'm good at this. So 21, 24. Okay. So we got a new project, and we'll put shock on this. Save that. All right, let's list our workbooks. There we go. Yeah, that's right. You had the folder. Good eyes, David.
Hey.
Okay, create selected. So we just go through all our little warning messages. And now we should have a new macro in here called shock. There we go. That's the right one. So one way you can deal with this now, if you want to make it easy on yourself, you could just copy, make a copy of this guy. mnproj 202. So there's different ways of setting this up. Either we could have just written it, just write it over this one if you want to do it that way. You could also make a secondary project database, and the way you would do that is create a whole different BAM file, call it shock, for example. Go in here, and then we would just, let's rename everything. So shock, copy paste shock. That's the safest way to do this. Then you can, I mean, you can just keep operating version A versus version B of your project system, essentially. So there, we have the shock. So obviously I need a copy of the copy base. Call it shock. And in this case, we're going to be calling it 202 shock. Shock. Save that. The header as well. Actually, you know what? The header doesn't matter. Oh, sorry, it does, because it's going to create the base name. Excuse me. Shock. So right here. So this is where we're creating the major project database in the header. So you can do it this way. It's probably one of the safest ways to deal with this. So that'll create us a new mnproj 202 shock once it's the header's run. We also want to run that, which we included in our shock batch file, the BAM file at the top here. So we'll run the header shock, the project shock, and then the copy paste shock. That's the plan. And as long as we have all these right, we're dealing with the shock version of the database. We're dealing with the header is creating that shock base. And we have a project macro called with shock on the end as well. So now I can move into that, go back to that projects folder and run that shock BAM. Okay. Back to the model folder, and we should have a database in there called Major Proj MN Proj 202 shock, which we do. Created right now. So all we need to do with this is, at this point, the only spreadsheet, or sorry, macro in this case that requires adjusting would be the EX6. So what we could do here is, in our ASOL shock BAM, is open that up. And why don't we just call the EX6 a shock version, and which we will create right now. And that the reason I'm doing this is because we want to be able to differentiate where we read those major projects from. And you do that just by changing the macro parameter at the top here. So that MN Proj 202, we want it to be the shock version. Okay, so at this point we have everything set up. We've got a new project in there that we made up. We're differentiating the whole system so that we have two different project databases, one that contains the new project and one that does not. And then we're going to solve this system using the EX6 shock, which reads from that new database. Secondly, here you want to, this is my shock version, okay. Right, and that runs the ASOL shock, perfect. So this will run the whole system. It'll read from the new project base, and it will run that shock macro, shock's ASOL file that adds the appendage underbar S to the every variable name. And I see this now that I don't have the shock tables in here for you. That might just be in the version I have. Let me just check here. While that's running. Okay, we didn't have them in here. So I can go get them. We have a bunch of preset shock database or tables that we create to do this type of work. So I just got to get it out of my IMP files system here. Where are the shock files now? Okay, somehow I've lost my shock tables. What's going on here? Old tables. Here they are. So I'll just get a couple of the key ones that we can look at, maybe income. I'm not even sure if this one will work right now. We'll have to fix up some of these tables for you and include it in the next version, because you're going to want to use these, and we can get them fixed up this week and send them over. It's not a big deal. With demographics as well. Consumers, we'll just take one of each. Okay, so the last question you're asked, of course, is shock extension added? Are you sure you want to unload that? Just so you don't destroy your database by accident. So what I do here, when you add new TBL files to the system or to the folder, the working folder, the way to get them to appear is just to open up the program options and hit OK. And it'll read the files once again when it does that. YGDPM. Okay. Now at the end of the shock system, one thing I did forget to tell you, we would typically want to open the bases in a certain order. And in that case, that means we set it up as what you call shock minus control. So as the read base, we want our standard MNF 202 database open as well. So if I was to run this, it would have automatically opened that for me. But it depends what you're comparing against in this case. So this way, if I run the system or I keep making modifications to the shock, trying to account for different things, it'll just keep popping that open automatically. So I'm all set for the analysis. So opening the key report now. So what you do get, you start to get, you can compare your GDP level differences and some percentage differences. So that's what these shock tables typically do. I think the first check for us, which year did I? This must be a slightly different system. Oh, you know we've done, guys.
Starting in 2021.
Sorry. Yes. No, I realize what's happened here. I've got a different model than yours. That's the problem. I took the project database from yours, whereas we used it. We've been working on it since I sent you the August model. So let's assume we got the right years here. I'll have to fix this for you. But what's happened here is typically you're just going to see the project show up when you put it in, and you can see here that we did put in about $1 billion allocated over 4 years. So generally speaking here, you're seeing there will be some crowding out of investment in other sectors of the economy here. So you see this number sort of depleting a little bit relative to the absolute 250 we injected into the economy. But the idea of this system is then first thing you'd want to do, if I had my tables working, is you could come in here and view the differences in the project. So IMA MN, for example, and MN F202 shock. Oops, sorry, I should put the right appendix on there. What did I do? Oh, under S, sorry. There we go. And then I will compute the difference from them, just so we can look at it. Okay, ignoring these differences here, given that we're using a different set of projects overall, this is the concept here. So you would see your project go in. You could then look at all the different impacts across the economy. Now, of course, there are some extra things going on here because we have a bit of a different project base that I'm going to have to work with here to make these adjustments. So probably the best thing to do here. Let me just go grab your model. Second layer here. Anyways, my apologies for this, guys. I thought I had this working, but forgot that I'm working with separate models. And go. Well, this way you'll get some repetition. Okay, we're all set. Last two things I need to do. I'm just going to make sure I use the right EX6 here. Okay. Yeah, you know what happened there? I have the population data updated in my model. That's why we had the difference. So I had a 2020 list in my files, whereas you do not here in this version. Okay. Our MNF 202. Save that. All right, I'm just going to set the directory. And I have a feeling this doesn't work because we have some industries, so I can just fix this up in a sec here. Export, I know it's wrong. So this, we eventually got new fixed capital stocks and flows data. They disaggregated the government investments when we got some new data. So this should actually just be, why don't we just put it as GS? It's relevant for what we're doing here. So import those rows. Oh, I left one. Great. Oh, of course. I'll just do it this way. What is going on here? Okay. So there we go. That's working properly. So the idea here is we have a preset bunch of shock tables created for you guys at various levels of detail. So what you can do is once you put your shocks in, come in, and of course, as David yelled out right away, why is there differences in 19 and 20 if we put in the project in 21 to 24? So as you can see, this appears to be working in this case now that I've got the right model. But the 2020 number, you're going to see no difference because we were not changing anything in that case. But we did, of course, make the adjustment here. from 21 to 24. And for the most part, you can see that we almost got about 250 million per year, excluding crowding out and other dynamic effects that are going on across the economy. So, and of course that we selected the manufacturing industry in this case, so it shows up as the FKSF on the business side of things, business investment, whereas the government saw very little difference. So what's happening on the government, the reason you're getting any pickup or change here is because of how we deal with per capita spending increases. So you can bet that by adding this additional investment into the model, into the economy, you probably sucked in some migrants because of the job generation that was created. You know, we did allocate another 250 construction jobs per year there during the construction phase, so that would have drawn in some interprovincial migrants, maybe a few international ones as well in the system. And then you get obviously some current spending and government capital spending increases that would come with that. So if you go down here, again, I apologize, I'll have to fix these tables for you, but obviously the numbers should be showing up in the manufacturing industry's investment in this case. Which they are by the first difference here, or the difference between the shock minus control. So all these tables are set up the same way. We show the shock, and then we show the base level of investment without that shock occurring. You can then see the differences in percent change, and of course we got a big jump up in that first year with that extra 250 million in investment going on. It then of course flatlined, so you get some other cyclical or impacts going on with dynamic effects across the economy. So it is clearly the first check would be every time you're doing some type of shock, did my change take did it go into the system properly? And this is obviously from a major project standpoint, this would be your first check. Make sure that you in fact did increase the manufacturing investment as you intended to. From there, you know, of course, you're going to see some additional investment required by the construction industry. They got some different demands put on them. What else we have? Obviously, utilities is picking up. So a lot of this would be sort of effects from additional migrants coming into the economy. So why don't we go take a look at the key report table. So here's your difference in your GDP levels from injecting that project into the system. Obviously, it's generated some jobs with it, so you're going to get some consumer spending increases, probably new housing requirements as well, so pushing up the residential investment as well as renovation work because of all the additional income from all these jobs. There's your plant and equipment, of course, and a little bit of an increase on the government side. So really, you know, once the government set off on a new path, new population, you know, it takes off for a while, but then you can see that there are some cyclical impacts here. So when we look at things like population, let's go down here a bit.
I noticed going up that your exports in 2025 are up 100 million, which ties into the end of the construction of that plant. And also
Yes,
with
sorry.
the investment side, with the manufacturing, there was an 18% decline in 2025.
Right. So there you are. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's our gross output estimate that we were using. Yeah. Right. That employment time productivity method.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can see that it is working the way it's supposed to. So that's what you'll kind of get here. So you see production turning on after 2024. So you start to see an export kick up because we assumed 100% of that output is going to be converted into higher exports coming out of Manitoba. On the import side, you're going to get more import offsets as well because you now have a larger, you know, you've drawn in more people, you've raised income, people are buying things and goods and services, so that you get a pickup on the imports as well. What else do we have here? Not a lot of major price impacts, hardly measurable. Well, certainly not to one decimal place, but you can see that the shock does generate a little bit of inflation in here relative to the base case numbers. CPI barely moves. It's tiny impact there by 24 to 3 decimal places on the index at least.
Right. Tara had a question, so let's just jump in, Tara.
Yeah, please just stop me anytime.
Well, I figured I'd raise my hand first.
No, don't raise your hand.
Looking at a screen when you put your hand up. So.
Just pretend we're in a classroom.
Well, just mostly because you raised the point. In terms of decimals, is there some sort of restriction on the number of decimals that you can output?
No.
I know that I've run into some issues before where things get chopped off and I'm not getting the precision that I'd kind of like to have. I mean, I'm one of those weird people that I carry fractions of people out to like 8 decimal places or something. And then when I'm outputting my data, exporting it mostly to Excel, I'm ending up with stars in my output rather than numbers.
Okay.
So I was just kind of wondering if there was some limitation.
Not at all. There's probably, I don't know how many, maybe 120 something decimals on here. I should have mentioned this before. So these are in your table rows where you control for this stuff. So looking at these tables, that's what these numbers are off to the side here. So the table structure, and this is all in the manual, is variable, and then essentially quote. So you can put something between the quotes. This is your title that will show up on the row, right? And you can have that blank if you want, but then you'll have no title. By default, the program would then show the variable name. So let me just give you an example here really quickly. If I take that shock out, and this final number is your number of decimal places. So you'll notice that we put the decimals in for the percent changes, for example, and not typically the levels because we're dealing with millions of dollars in this case. But if I just do a quick example here, we open that now. So the first line, I just got rid of that word shock, so it would just show me the variable name. So the most as simple table you can make would really just have the format of, for example, YGDPMN quote, and then however many decimals you'd like to put in there. So that's really. Go ahead, sorry.
Just for the heck of it, can you try putting in something like 8 decimals?
Yes.
Or maybe the issue is, in my case, I'm dealing with a value that might already be in thousands or hundreds of thousands, and then I'm also tacking on decimal places. So I don't know. I'm not sure what issue I'm running into, but I feel like I am running into some issue.
Well, we can put, I mean, you can look at the GDP numbers to 3 decimals or something. That'll at least give you down to thousands, the units and that kind of stuff. So you can make any tables you like. It's completely up to you what level of detail you want. For example, when we work on our Prince Edward Island model, we need our housing starts down to single units because that is what matters. Whereas in Ontario and the bigger provinces we're working in, the hundreds are good enough in that case. So it's up to you completely how much detail we put in here. On percentage difference terms, are you talking about like the CPI and stuff? You want to see those ones go up? Whatever you like. I mean, we can change them all. It's
maybe I can reach out to you later and just kind of give you an example of the issue that I'm having. But
okay.
If you're saying there's no restrictions, then at least I know that there isn't supposed to be.
Yeah, no, none at all. Obviously here, like employment, let's put that. We don't want that at 0. I don't know why. That's wrong. Labor force. We can do some more detail in the unemployment rate analysis. Even the part rate, 1 decimal is not very useful. Population, let's get down to the individual person. Same with the migration. A lot of these things may not be that necessary, but okay, so yeah, this will make more sense at least. The rest of them are definitely going to have differences. So, okay, let's take a look at it this way then. So now I put all these GDP components, GDE components to 3 decimals. I did not alter the percent changes, but if we look move down the list here. This certainly helps for looking at the population differences, of course, because, you know, so here we go. So in the first year, we sucked in an extra, or population was 130 people higher, and you can see that was all migration coming in. But once that occurs, you can then have births and so forth impacting. And obviously these levels will build as you have migrants being pulled in under a tighter labor market. So here we have, you can see the unemployment rate is lower up here as the project kicks in. So it puts the pressures, you know, puts pressures on the labor market. It puts pressures on prices. Those types of effects are all built into the impact when you do this type of stuff.
So, Aaron, that's where the crowding out comes from?
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. Higher price impacts are, of course, going to crowd out investment. So you can see when you start looking at the other sectors on the investment table, for example, in some cases, depending on the project size, you know, because you can get in some project cases very high price inflation impacts in the cost of construction and that type of stuff, and even materials over time. So you can end up seeing actual net negative differences in other sectors. But for the most part, because there are dynamic effects and we're getting people sucked into this model through this shock, you're seeing that all the differences here are actually positive from what I see in all sectors. And I would expect that to be the case. And that's just because your population's larger. If we were to freeze the population, i.e. not let the model solve migration or population in the shock, or you wanted to impose a fixed number of, you know, fixed level of population, then you definitely see domestic sales impacts lowering these things. You know, you obviously lessen the impact on employment, lessen the impact on the service sector demands, all that type of stuff. So, and then in that case, I would expect to see more, you know, negative numbers, negative levels on investment in all industries, or not all, not necessarily all, but in many of the industries outside of manufacturing where we put that project. And that's because of those crowding out price effects that occur.
And it's kind of interesting that even after the construction is done, you know, those same impacts persist into the operations of the plant. Right.
That's right.
Kind of a neat feature.
Yes, and well, here on the accommodation food, for example, I found one for you. There are obviously some price impacts actually crowded out some of the demand for accommodation food services in this case. I'm not exactly sure why. We'd have to investigate that, but you do have those types of effects occurring. And then moving on, let me just look at the manufacturing sector again. You would have sustaining investment differences that will last all the way into the future, of course. So you're adding an increase in capital that is going to have to be maintained over time at the manufacturing industry's depreciation rate, or because we were using the project system in this case, this test project, that $1 billion is going to need to replace 5% of its M&E every year and 2% on its buildings. Based on those depreciation rate assumptions that we put in there. So there will be a sustaining component, direct component for that project. And you can look at that. Let me just count. So the way these are numbered, or if you remember me showing you, they number them 1 to 6 by industry. So, or sorry, they number them by industry. So that in this case, we'd be talking about project 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I would want to look at using the project database in the shock version. That is, I'm looking for IT MAMN6, I believe. No, wrong one. Hang on. I forget the order these are in sometimes. Is it? Oh, it's OMA. Sorry. There you go. So you just look at the IT star, you can see these are all the investment variables. So for example, for the other manufacturing, you have the summation of all 6 of them. So you can look at, or you can look at every individual project in this case. So we put in project 6, so there they are. And because I chose 2012 as the deflator year, being the base year, there was no deflation performed. So we got an even horizontal distribution that we selected of 250 million per year. And then after that project's finished, what we have built into the system is a bit of we allow it to cycle up for 3 years. That's the assessment. The assumption is that right after you finish building something, you're going to have lower sustaining requirements in the first year it operates because everything's brand new. Whereas after that, you'll start to see a bit of a ramp up. So we just do 1/3, 2/3, and then reaching the 100% sustaining level is the idea here. So that's just something we've built into the system. So you don't get an immediate depreciation rate, full sustaining investment in the new year when the project's just started. So this is essentially what you're looking at. So you can track each project you put in here. You can look at how much money it's contributing to the economy on an individual project basis by doing this. And then, of course, we have the summation of all projects in the top number that does not have a number on the end of it. So that's all summed up at the bottom of the major project macro. But generally speaking, I mean, this is essentially what you can do with the project system. You can do this type of impact analysis. One thing that we do as well, I know that not every component of a potential project can be controlled for with this system. For example, construction import leakages, things like that. And you can modify the model to try and account for that stuff if you guys are modeling a very important project. And of course, we use our model that way when we're doing custom economic impact studies, where we know that, say for a gold mine or something like that, we know exactly where the machinery is coming from globally, and we want to directly account for that. So you can modify the domestic sales equations and the import and export equations to try and account for that component. So there's many things you can do. You just have to think about what you're looking at here as you model these projects.
Aaron, I have a question about some of those crowding out effects that you were referring to earlier.
Yes.
If you have large capital investment and the unemployment rate within the construction industry is quite low, you don't have a bunch of construction workers just kind of sitting around waiting for work, right? So how does the model kind of determine whether that's going to cause wage inflation, or whether those workers will come from out of the province, or some of the other possible scenarios that could occur?
Of course, yeah. I mean, you look at the structure of the wage equation. In incredibly tight markets overall, you're going to see the fastest wage growth in our system. So if I can just find the model. Oops, find next. Normal. There we go. So here it is up here. Here we're looking at the relative tightness in the market, the UR unemployment rate relative to your normal rate. So of course it is your your performance measure here on wage growth. So places like the oil sands, Alberta, when they were in that major crunch and the major development phase pre-financial crisis, obviously wages were inflating at an exorbitant rate, and Tim Hortons workers were making $25 an hour, of course. So you get that is all built into the equations as your market tightens. So what I should just show you, I think we have it in this table. We should. Where is the wage? What I'd like to do here is build a table, a shock table, that's just like our key analysis one. That would be the most beneficial because it has all this stuff in it. We haven't yet done that. Typically, when we do shocks, we build custom tables to analyze them. But
with that. Can we play around with that normal unemployment rate as well? Because you were talking that maybe that 5% could be a little too low, and that would have an impact then.
A bit. The equation is fitted, so we would have to look at that as well. But yeah, no, I mean we can adjust it for you. It's
table that's fitted.
Right. I mean, it's all relative, right? So you set it at 5.5, which may look a little bit better given that the unemployment rates come up in the province in the past 5 years. But I think I'll put that on my to-do list as something we can do for you.
But you can play around with that here, right? I mean, could you technically shock it by just having like a higher normal unemployment rate?
Absolutely.
If you up it by 0.5% just to see what the impact would be? Is that?
Of course, yeah. I mean, you would change the properties, well, the impact on all the equations, as you can see here, right? Because we have the market tightness measure, and it's a consumer confidence measure in some cases. I mean, look at the residential equations up here. You've got this built into your consumption, and that's going to cause massive impacts. You have it built into your housing starts as well, right? Looking at the differential. So if you start to bring that URN up, you'll get less of an impact there a little bit.
Well, it's sort of a Phillips curve kind of relationship, right, for wages?
Exactly, yeah. So hopefully you guys got the gist of what I'm trying to show you here. We are gonna build out your tables here and help you out a bit because these ones are outdated. I know I have some new ones somewhere. I just have to get them. But yeah, you can look at it on any angle you want, building out these shock minus control tables. All kinds of options available there. And we could certainly make them a bit prettier and add a little more detail on the decimals for you guys. So that could help out. So that was, I hope there's no questions about how you can use that project system. It's relatively straightforward. We try to make it as pain-free as possible. And like I said, you didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
Just have to add in a pun saying it's shockingly easy to do.
It is. It's shockingly easy. That's right. Yeah. Now we try to make it easy. We used to hand code all these projects and drive ourselves nuts back in the day. So we finally got around to programming Visual Basic stuff and setting up this spreadsheet system as the country, as we started modeling, 300 projects across the country. So it's, I think Ontario's list has about 80 or so, 80 to 100 in it. It's just getting almost out of control. But lots of investment. This is the new era. We're moving into the investment era here because consumer spending slowing down.
Low interest rates.
Yeah, that's right. It's time to borrow and build. And also the baby boomers are all moving into retirement and slowing down their spending. So that kind of stuff's going on as well. So lots of major infrastructure stuff. And of course, that is the push by the feds with the infrastructure bank and so forth. Okay, so I hope that gives you a good idea of that first exercise we really wanted to deal with here today. I also have on the agenda, you guys requested to deal with population growth assumptions. So modifying a little overview on how you would deal with that. Now, I showed you guys how to adjust population using our methods, right? Using the EX1, for example, here, where you can set immigration rate assumptions as a ratio of the population, where you can obviously just directly set to your non-permanent residents the level of them. So you guys may have views on that stuff. I'm not sure what you guys do impose. I haven't been involved in that in the past. Otherwise, we typically tune the net interprovincial migration numbers, and then really they're impacted by that relative tightness in the labor market as well. That's built into that equation. So you're sort of just fighting those levels as to what you think the story is going to be, and what's acceptable, within historical bounds, or if you do have limits, you're trying to stay within. That's what you could do, how you would use these adjustment factors. And then
Aaron, maybe a question that I have on that is,
yes,
if we are overriding the population growth estimates in your model with our own estimates, I'm just wondering how that interacts with all of the other variables in the model, notably unemployment rate and GDP growth. If you can maybe speak to that a little bit.
of course. Okay, so why don't we just start by looking at what we do have here. That might help. So our current numbers that we've generated here are showing a bit of an uptick. Well, obviously COVID is sort of hitting a low. This model that we're looking at doesn't have the 2020 numbers that have been finalized in it. So this was I believe this is from our summer forecast. But the whole point is, say you guys come in with less migration or more. Why don't we just assume you're coming in with more? For one, higher population is going to start putting more pressure on consumer service sectors. And that's because typically consumption of services is a very high portion of overall consumption. So as these people come in, they're going to generate demand. They're going to drive up employment. So you would typically have stronger employment growth, and mostly, more so in the service industries, the lower productivity sectors, because of those increases. That's going to generate more labor income with it, and you're going to have higher consumption impacts, and so on and so on. Your housing starts are going to be picked up. You're going to have obviously residential investments going to climb with that. So you're going to see a lot of positive multipliers. It would also impact the cycles that are generated, the timing of the cycles that the model would then generate as you go out several years. So you would then, if you guys are hard coding this stuff for the whole, how long are your forecasts, I guess, is the first question. Do you typically do a 10-year? Or are you going right out to 2050 these days?
The population projection model has always done a 35-year run. So
wow.
I think the last time I did something, it was 2053, 2054.
Okay. Do you need the model solved out past 2050 then for that type of work? Because we end the solution in 2050 right now. As we do go forwards over the years here, we are starting to get requests from some customers to go beyond 2050. So that's always an option we can look at for you guys if you want to see it go out further.
I'm not sure if that's a big priority currently, but it's good to know that you guys are kind of having those discussions with other jurisdictions as well.
Yeah. Most people they just have that arbitrary number of a 25-year forecast or 35-year forecast, that kind of stuff. So it's we end up having to force our stuff out. So we'll probably be pushing it out to 2060 sometime in the next couple of years, just so we are not limited by the length there.
Out of curiosity, so if you were to override the population growth estimates and kind of run a shock scenario, how long would that take you to do? Like, do we have the time to do that right now? It would be, I think, beneficial to see how you do it step by step.
Okay, one problem. So when you guys create your data, are you doing single year of age? Do you have all of that information for your demographics?
When I'm running the population projection model, it is single years of age, including -1, and goes up to 100 plus, and it is by economic region.
Okay, yeah, so you can aggregate that to the provincial level for use. Okay, well, as you can see here, all of the population data all the population variables, in the model are stochastics. So what you would be doing in that case is you would essentially just impose your values. You could write a macro to do that and put update commands on every single one of these variables. Not just the left-hand side ones, of course. You don't have to worry about all this other stuff, like fertility rates and so forth. That's all from your system. So obviously you want to get aggregate births. You want to get your migration components, all left-hand side variables imposed. You can see that some of these are identities. So the emigration, you would have to compute your emigration rate as we do, right? So that would just be whatever you're predicting for emigration numbers divided by your population numbers last year. So you're just taking this equation and computing that rate, you know, inverting the equation. So that would have to be imposed as well to get immigration.
Yeah, we have some definition differences there as well. With our model, we group together the temporary flows, and have the permanent flows separated out rather than grouping together the ins and the outs, that sort of thing. So, you know, we have an other international. We don't have non-permanent residents and then lumping together those immigration components. So there's a little bit of a definition thing there as well.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, no, it can get a little tricky. You know, you just got to basically look through the model. The only challenge, Tara, is when you're dealing with identity equations, right? Because in this case, you know, by definition, you just have to have the right-hand side correct as well. So, you know, one method we could do is we can switch this into a stochastic and just remake the model, and then you can impose the DMIG number if that works. That's a solution. Otherwise, you're stuck computing that rate on last year's population. So that if you can come up with this number with your data at the provincial level, then you can absolutely produce that rate as well to get those numbers right. And you can put them in as many decimals as you want, so you get complete precision there. But for the rest of these things, where you're dealing with stochastics, you can just impose it. Like the CNPRs, you would just set it. What we do here, you may notice, we call this is equal to the same variable with a 1 on it, and we do that so that the history can't possibly get overwritten in our history database. So that way you can have values that are differ than the actual history. It would then read it. So that's just why if you're just curious, but if you notice that. But the idea here is anything that's stochastic, you come in, you impose it in a macro with an update command. You then go and access your do not solve list for the entire solution period. So these age groups aren't a concern. So this is all you have to really touch is the single year of age for the males, single year of age for the females, and these ones at the top. You would make update commands for each one of them. And then we would go into the ASOL macro here. And for these solution periods, so what I could do, let me just give you a demo of how you could code it. It'd be very easy to do. Just to be safe, I'll take the 2018 list. But all I would do is grab all the D variables here, except for domestic sales, combination of food. I think I've got all population there, so just copy that out. Now I've lost the ASOL. And then within these quotes, you could just put them all there. And then for the rest, because we have this broken down, the reason we have this broken down is because that Manitoba rate increase, the plan was to increase it to 2028, right? And then from 2029 and on, we then let the model solve everything. So all you would do is that, take the none out. There you go. It'll use your data, so long as you have an update macro that runs within that BAM system. You can just put it in there at any time. You just got to get this data into that history database. That's all I'm saying here. You impose the values, put it in the history database, all those imposed values, and then you tell the model, don't solve these. That's all you're doing here. Don't solve them for this date range. Don't solve them for this date range. That's it. Your data is now imposed in the forecast. So I wouldn't be too concerned with that. I think it's a pretty relatively easy task. I'm not sure. I know you guys used to do this in the past. I remember, I think Rob Daniels in my office used to help you out with this sometimes, as I recall, it was many years ago.
Yeah,
But,
we had different population numbers too. That was the added trouble.
Right.
So
Yeah, I remember.
for adding a lot. It was
that was when Wilf used to fight with StatCan. Is that right?
16,000 people hiding in his office apparently somewhere.
That was specific to that one particular census, I believe 2011. I'm pretty sure was the one.
Okay.
Yeah, coverage study issues.
Yeah.
I think what it taught us is that we preach to everyone that StatCan, the data is the official estimates, but we at that point we refused to acknowledge that, and it just turned everything upside down in terms of the things we were trying to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the numbers are better this time, but I mean, yeah.
Then there's that occupation model. That member sitting in on that.
Well,
That occupation model that Ernie did. And yeah, it was the differences in population numbers too, and
yeah.
Good times. So another dumb question, but you don't do anything with like an inventory number, right? On the expenditure side, you just kind of leave it at 0, essentially.
What are our inventories numbers set at right now? Let me see. If you have that information, you can. That's what I was talking about yesterday. You would adjust your inventories, accumulation or whatever through your the VCB and the add factor.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Do we even have it in our table? We should add that as a line number for you. Put an inventory line right here below the imports. That would. I think we did that to our Saskatchewan one because, as I was mentioning, that's the farm inventory stuff is really big for them.
Yeah.
So you're just talking about VCB in this case. We can look at let's put. So here's the, of course, the history. Right now, we had a bit of formation, and then we say that it's the equation's producing these results.
So
we
that's
haven't.
the farm side?
Sorry?
That's the non-farm change?
This is the aggregate, yeah.
That's okay. So that's the aggregate. Okay, farm and non.
Right. Let me just go look at the model again for you. Yeah, and I got too many things open. Oh no, gotta go to the top. Right there. So here's your equation. There's your constant, and then reacting to final domestic demand plus exports in this case. And there's your stock. So you can work on that. This is one we talked about yesterday. Best way to adjust it is just using a simple add factor.
Okay.
On the VCB, the real inventory component. Okay. So was that okay on the population imposing method? If you guys do forget, please just contact us. We can have you set up in no time here. It's imposing values is very easy in the system because you are just setting it up like this with the exclude process, right? Of course, all you got to make sure of, if you are going to try and impose something, it has to be a stochastic variable, right? It has to. You can't exclude identities. It just doesn't work. So what you want to do first is investigate. Take a look at the model. Look at the equations that you're dealing with. Look at the variable. Make sure that because if it is an identity, you're going to have to actually impose everything on the right-hand side. And in some cases, you can go a bit down the rabbit's hole, tracing these variables through the model, trying to get things set up. So this is, of course, in this case, we're looking at residential investment. but everything on the right-hand side is a stochastic. So you would just have to impose the components of IRCB in this case because it's an identity. So that is really what you got to worry about. And if there are problems that we run into down the road with things you do want to impose, we can always switch the equations to stochastics. The reason we don't do that is because, well, in the past, it ate up a lot more computer memory and so forth, because those stochastic equations, when the data set is solved, they get into the simultaneous block solution. So it just gets massive, right? If you start converting hundreds of variables into stochastics that really don't need to be there. So that's really why the whole concept of identity versus stochastic, other than identities literally being an identity equation. So it's really about just going through the model, investigating, making sure what you're imposing is stochastic, and then you'll be fine. You can impose whatever you want, so long as you do a proper job excluding it for the right solution years in the ASOL system.
Yeah, I think it might just be one of those things that we have to test out and, see how it goes. And,
Right.
We might have to reach out to you to kind of confirm that we were following, all of the appropriate steps. And, if something is not working out, then you guys can kind of troubleshoot us.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, a lot of our clients do that. They just they'll just upload their model. They get the model so far, say, look, I think I've got this all set up. Can you just take a quick check for me that I'm doing all this right? I'll upload the files. We can just grab them and take a quick look. It's not a very painful process. So, and we can usually do it quite efficiently for you. Make sure you're good. And this is really a learning by doing process here, of course. So you get a little experience. You guys should be comfortable over time, and you'll eventually develop your internal systems, and you'll be set for the next time. Okay.
Oh, and the videos, like after this is all done, are you just gonna put this in like a Dropbox for us, and then we just go download it, or?
Sure. Yeah, I can do that. I'll just see how I haven't never done 2-hour meeting videos, so I'll see what I can grab.
I downloaded one of them and I couldn't download it.
Is that right? Okay. Did they show up on the chat? Because that's what it was saying that.
It says it's there, but when you go to like copy the link and then paste it into like a browser, and it just says that the video is not there.
Okay, I'll figure it out because I was watching one last night, so I know it is stored in their server. And it is working. It hasn't been erased.
Yeah. You needed help falling asleep, so you put on one of your videos.
It was more of a technical test. So just wanted to make sure it worked. Right. I promise you guys are recording, and I'm not an expert with it, so.
Go to sleep, kids.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, let my children watch it. So. Okay, so I think what else do we have here on the agenda? Made some pretty decent progress here. So the other concept you wanted to look at was provincial tax rate stuff. So again, we can do some quick shocks on that type of stuff, or I can just show you. I mean, I think you get the idea of what we're up to here. There are a few methods then when you are doing the other ways to shock. So why don't I just show you a couple examples of how you could have the alternate procedure. Put that back. Get rid of that one. Okay. So there's different ways of conducting your shock in where you make the modification to the files. One of the safer ways of doing this, so when you're looking at, for example, provincial tax rates, so I just look at, just get to the province section here. Okay, so as I said, not that many options here, really. Retail sales, you know, and essentially the business taxes. But let's just do a retail sales tax, for example, to make it something straightforward. So here we're dealing with TRI, RSTP, MN. That's the variable name. So there's, as I said, there are different ways of doing this. Myself, I like to put in highly visible section breaks when I put in shocks that really stand out. So I use the pound signs here, for example. I would then, the way you could do this is just put that in and say, okay, what are we going to do here? How about in 2021, we raise the retail sales tax rate to 12%. Yeah. Or you want to do something realistic. Why don't we do the actual drop to 6 then? That was part of the plan that didn't occur. So 2019, 2021. So all I've done is copied the code here, put it in down here. So this is one way of doing it. You could then run that shock BAM file and this would work. This would take the problem with that, actually here, sorry, and you want that to be continued, I forgot. So you'd then take this block, which extends the last value, and we would change that to 22. So we have 19, 20, 21, and then from 22 to 2050, we're then taking that 6% and extending it in this case, if that's what your intentions were, or if you were just trying to do a 1-year shock or a 1-year tax rate thing, it's, you know, that would be the alternate. But the point is here, you can put these adjustments in the EX6, but the danger of doing this is you forget that they're in here. Maybe not so much of a danger. I know we all remember what we've done, but another way of doing this, though, would be to actually do it in the ASOL macro. And if you were to do it in here, very importantly, you would have to do it before this load all command. Because what that's actually doing, it's taking the data out of the database that we write, the history base, and it's loading it into that data set, which is like a binary, you can think of it as a binary code version of the software. So you'll notice the way Forecast here works, you take data from a database, you load it into a data set, the solution algorithms are all computed within the data set, and then we unload again. We unload that data back to a database for viewing. So that is actually how the software works. You load it, you solve it, you unload it. Now you can look at it. You cannot look at information in the data set. It is essentially a big binary system that's built into the program. So that's how this is set up.
I had two dumb questions for you. 2 dumb questions. When
there are no
you set
dumb
your tax rate to 6%, do you have to set that for every subsequent year after that, or does it just know because of the equation is just taking like the previous year's tax rate?
Here, right. Well, it depends what you want to do here.
Okay.
You know, if you read this code, what we're doing, so we're holding it constant. So the retail historical rate, we only have the provincial economic account data to 2018. You know what we actually do, the reason we put this in here is just so you can see what's happening, right? Okay. So you went from a rate of 8% in 2018, mid-year, I guess July 1st, you dropped to 7% in 2019, so you get the 7.5, the midpoint. And then, of course, if you stopped at 7% by 2020, you're now at 7%, of course. It was
the next line is copying it over from 2021 to 2050. I see it now.
Right. Yeah. It's taking the lag value. You see the minus.
Yeah, right? I see it now.
You see, that's what the minus 1 is. It's
yes.
lag.
And then my other dumb question is that with that feedback command when you're doing the solving business, if you just jump over to the BAM file, so the rule of thumb is you run the feedback, you have the feedback with history. Is that the extent here?
Correct. All it does is it computes the stochastic errors for you to make just so you can look at them later. All this stuff isn't absolutely essential, but historically, yes, we would typically put that in. It's just a standard practice that we put into the code. So.
But there's no instance of using the feedback for like future values and for like forecasting.
No, no.
Okay.
Not. Right.
Okay.
Yeah, you're wondering why that line is not down here.
Yeah,
Right.
I just you know, I just want to ask a few dumb questions just to.
No. It's because it's calculating the errors from
Okay.
in the stochastic equations from the actual known data, right?
Okay.
So there, by definition, there are no errors because this is all estimated
Yes.
for the forecast period. So that's why you don't see the feedback line in there for these final components here. 2020 on, that is. So anyways, the point all I'm trying to make here is if you're doing these types of shocks on the model, this is a good location to do it in. That way you can save, actually, you know what, I wouldn't even do it in this one. I would do it in the shock version, excuse me.
I was just about to ask that, actually.
Yes, good
Yeah.
thinking. I got carried away with my point here. Right. So you'd want to put it in there instead.
And then we'd have to clear those major projects ones, right? That would.
Right. What we would have to do is we would have to change the BAM file so that we don't run that EX6 that was using the major project shock version. So, right. If you're moving from shock to shock, you got to just be aware of what you're up to here. So again, just open this guy up and get rid of that shock word, the word shock on there. Now we'll go back to reading from the original project database without that food plant. And there's no issue here, so that should be it. Okay, so you can then run this shock.
You could have multiple shock macros, correct?
You can have as many as you want. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see what you mean, Thomas, because then you could keep track of different scenarios that maybe you want to run.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly what we do with multi-scenario analysis. You know, if it's on a project, I'll have 3 or 4 EX6s, all reading from different databases, project databases, that kind of stuff you can control for, or whatever you want, of course. Okay, so 2021 was our shock year, right? As I recall. It's too bad I don't have a government table. We could look at what it does on an income basis. But yeah, I'll get these tables developed for you. We can send them over before Christmas, or we can send them over with the new model. It's up to you.
Sounds like a wonderful Christmas present for us. Thank you.
So
Show your family on Christmas Day.
So a 1% decrease in 2021 resulted in, is that $27 million in consumer expenditures?
Correct. Yes. So we're getting some. You get the thing is with the price model, you get a whole bunch of price impacts here. Right.
So are people buying more stuff because they're paying less taxes?
Give me a minute. I don't do PST shocks every day. So. See, my intuition would say that you would have a cost reduction. So typically, why would employment be falling in this case? We may have to look at this one for you on the side. Let me just turn this off to confirm everything's back to normal first. So one way of checking that you are getting the same results, reproducible results of your base case, is just to turn your shock off for the first run, rather than jumping from one shock to another. Okay, yes. So that's what we're looking for, is all zeros. While I run it, I'm just going to take a quick look at look through the model here. Where's the ASO? There we go. Direct indirect taxes. Yeah, I mean, this should get into the cost model. That's the tracing method here. TIP revenues. Does the consumers table work? So it's interesting. You get a with the PST reduction, you get a 1-year positive impact on consumption, but then we start to see other effects occurring, and that's because there were some job losses that came with that. This is clearly likely related to the price model impacts that you get out of this stuff. So it could have something to do with energy. I'll have to take a look at it in detail. Unfortunately, I don't have every table that I require right now to do that. Services. Negligible.
Like some sort of government balance sheet table of some sort would probably be.
Yeah, no, I do have them. I'll have to get them for you. Provincial government. We've been improving our public accounts table stuff. So trying to make it read a bit better with tab ins on the subsectors and subcomponents of revenues and expenditures to just to clean it up visually. And I don't think we got into the shock version of them yet. It's been a busy year, so I'll get those fixed up for you. So what is happening here? Right, we're getting all kinds of price effects. So that's what's happening. You have nominal income impacts that are occurring here through the cost model that are affecting possibly some wages and so forth. You get some productivity adjustments, which have actually pushed lowered employment slightly, very slightly, which is surprising. Anyways, yeah, sorry guys, I don't have the ability to look at all the price impacts right now. I think we can at least look at the impact, the income table, which is clearly all out of whack here. Well, corporations are making more money. Yeah, it's hit the nominal side of the economy here. Cost rents. So clearly your taxes have fallen.
That's it, eh? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So all your negativity is coming from loss of income.
it has something to do with the inflation in the equations. We may have to look at offsetting that or freezing something when you're doing this type of a shock. So let me take a look at this stuff and we can hopefully get back to you on it. But I mean, the takeaway from this in general, which I want you guys to know, is of course, typically try to do your shocks in the solution macro. It's much safer than modifying your EX6s or any of your exogenous macros, unless you're making copies of them, and that's another safe way to do it. But if you were to do that, then you go after those BAM files to make sure that you are running the right stuff for each version of each shock or system run that you're doing there.
Here's kind of another dumb question. Like there was that federal announcement today, $100 billion, I guess, over 3 years. Feds.
This is the extra COVID stuff.
Yeah, like you don't do anything with that then, right?
For the transportation and warehousing industry, and that's the business.
Okay.
They're trying to provide some relief. It didn't seem like a lot of money, given what they've already handed out. So. Right. I was watching the news last night on the debate on why are we subsidizing or saving these sectors. We could do something. There's not much you can really do, particularly that small of an amount. It's barely a drip in the bucket, I think, on the grand scheme of things. You take that money and allocate it across the country, and for the transportation and warehousing and the restaurant sector, it's unless I have my numbers wrong, but $100 million is not much money.
No, it's $100 billion stimulus that was announced today.
100 billion.
Billion, yeah, and that's for.
I didn't see that. Okay.
No, it wasn't for like business side. I thought it was for like households.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No. I mean, this is continuing. You're talking about the whole package. Okay. Sorry, I was talking about another component. This was the debate on the airlines. What to do with the airlines. Yeah. With that, certainly, yes, we will do something about that. Exactly what we've done with the CERB. If this is going to be a transfer setup or whatever, we're going to have to modify, put that money in, try to do some type of per capita allocation across the provinces. So yes, absolutely, that will be going into the system. What we've done for now, because we have for this year's forecast, we had a hunch that this was coming. They were going to extend all kinds of subsidies. There's been talk about a basic wage even coming into play here. A lot of people talking about that sort of stuff over in the next couple of years. But for now, I think at the very least, we did assume that they were going to have to continue to provide income support because COVID is not over yet, right? And if they were to just pull the plug on all that stuff right now, even the enhanced DI system, everything would just fall apart. So the idea in our current forecast, the way we've tuned the consumer spending variables is that you kind of ignore those facts, that there would be a cliff, household income cliff that would fall off, and that you're actually moving your consumer spending increases into next year. Would be more so because we're going to see job gains coming from the second half of the year. So that's how we sort of got around that right now without, it's very hard to predict policy that hasn't been announced yet. So, right. And then otherwise you gotta tell people, yeah, we put in $100 billion or whatever, even though nothing's been said yet. So yes, we will be adding that for the January round.
Aaron, one thing that I've mentioned to Robert in the past, so this has come up a couple of times throughout our workshop here. MBS produces a preliminary GDP estimate every year, and this year we'll be releasing our 2020 estimate probably January. So is it possible for you guys to align your 2020 GDP numbers with our estimate, with our internal estimate? So I guess maybe
Sure.
It becomes a part of the history and then you kind of, that becomes kind of like the kind of the end point or the beginning where you start forecasting
Right.
beyond that point there?
Yes, we could certainly do something like that. You know, if you want to provide those numbers, we may have some questions. We'll have to review them, but I don't see why we couldn't do that for you for your model update. That would be fine.
Aaron, when you guys were talking about the wage equation, something jumped to mind, and I should have asked the question then, but it was the topic went by. But it just relates back to a question that Dave had. The URN variable is in ProvMods. Is that you guys produce that? It's sort of via a filtering process, right? Am I right about that?
Manitoba has actually been a special case. Typically, you're right, we would run it through the Hodrick-Prescott filter, an HP filter, and you would get a trend line through the middle, essentially. It basically just takes it's a smoothing a variable, a smoothing filter, essentially.
Yeah. Right.
So in Manitoba's case, I have to review. I think Rob Daniels knows about this with Ernie. I'll have to ask these guys. I can't quite recall what the case was, but for some reason we had always fixed it at 5%. So that may be something we can revisit for you as well, because you know, theoretical rate. The idea was that you guys had sort of some bad times. We're coming down a bit of an investment mountain with the kiosk project, which was causing some negative multipliers and that kind of stuff in the province. In some markets, and causing that rate to go up on average. But you know, at this point in time, we may just want to review that and possibly bring that up. It can have some unintended consequences, though, when you do that type of stuff. You need a bit of a recalibration, as I mentioned. But you know, if that's something you're really interested in seeing sort of fit through the middle of your current unemployment rate, that's something we can definitely look at for you.
For sure. Did it make much of a difference changing it by like 0.5%? I didn't quite
It
notice
would.
that.
You know what would happen as well in the national system? We would have to recalibrate your immigration share a little bit.
System, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
It would absolutely affect the interprovincial forecast of interprovincial migration. So, you know, it's something we could definitely work on and clean up. Okay. So we made some pretty good progress today. I think we've gotten through the entire agenda with some time to spare here. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about or look at here? Any reviews of any topics that we covered over the past 2 days almost?
Not for me. I know Mike mentioned earlier that he'd like to have a discussion with you and Robert on potential modeling of the education tax cut.
Right.
Dave or Mike or Tara or Mustafa, any kind of glaring questions that you have that you'd like to ask while we still have Aaron here?
No, I have nothing to say, nothing to ask.
Okay. Anything pops in your head, please feel free to send us an email anytime.
Yeah.
I think in my case, that's probably what I'm going to do too, is just send an email follow up, kind of explaining my decimal point situation. See if you've got any suggestions.
Sure.
Aside from getting rid of them, which has been my workaround lately.
Yeah, no problem.
For me, it's just a matter of getting my feet wet again, and then I'm sure there'll be a bunch of light bulbs that go on that will lead to questions on just, you know, I don't know. I'm not sure, but I mean, I'm sure I'll have questions once I start using it. So.
Okay. You know, and I do recommend if you guys have any, you know, table requests, angles that you like to look at the data, you know, feel free to either share them with us, or you can make requests. We can always improve things. Or you can just develop them on your own and keep them in a separate folder that you could then just copy in to the model every time we send it to you. So it's entirely up to you. But you know, the tables are incredibly powerful tools to go along with this system, and the way you design them can be everything. I think you know, we spend a lot of time improving our tables. We've been doing that over the years, just to look at all these sub information, you know, below the surface that we typically do look at, because it can be quite telling when you do really dig in with some of this information. So I do highly recommend you look at developing some of your own systems as well, if that helps you out.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for all the questions, guys. I think I hope you got what you wanted out of this session, and have a good idea of how to run this system now. It's pretty clear what is involved in it, what it contains, what it can do, how to use the project system, shock limitations, you know, what you can and can't do with the system, and the issues around those tax shocks that we want to potentially do in the future.
Can I just say a couple things? I gotta leave here. I got another meeting at 3. I just want to thank you guys, Thomas, for setting this up, and Robert and Aaron. This has been great, and actually being able to record this, because we've done this before. I think it was a hard thing is that when we reflect back on this stuff, because we have so many other things, just like every other shop.
Yeah.
That, you know, unless you're immersed in this, you really, you know, you can lose a lot, right, in terms of, you know, moving on to something else. But I think one of the things that we're trying to do here is really, this time, really integrate this model and forecasting abilities and shocks into, you know, some of our systems in place. So, you know, I think this has been very good. So that's all I wanted to say. But on the other thing is that maybe what I'll do is tomorrow, if you have some time, I can contact you both and chat about this education tax thing.
Sure. Just check my schedule, Mike. I know I have a presentation tomorrow. I'm available. I'll only be busy between 1 and 2 p.m. tomorrow.
Yeah, they basically want to know what would be what are like the costs associated with something like that, where it would be based on whether the cost is associated with time. So if it's time associated with it, then we can look at it that way, or yeah. So basically the whole premise is that they want to go from $1.2 billion in education property tax to 0. And what they haven't announced yet is how long that's going to take, whether that's 10 years or whatever. Okay. So that would be the shock, but you can see it would be very complicated, right? So
yes, yeah. Well, we just eliminate the tax base over time. So
yeah. Anyways, I'll follow up with you on that, but
okay.
Yeah, again, thanks. You guys can ask your questions or whatever you want, but I just wanted to say that. So
Thanks, Mike.
on that note, I gotta leave. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike. Thanks.
I'm good. Yeah, and then again, just with the videos, just send me an email as to how you want to get that to us, whether it's Dropbox or any other creative format, some sort of Google Drive or whatever.
Sure.
I think Dropbox is blocked through our managed environment, so I'll just use my personal computer and then do what I need to do. And I found there's some free softwares out there to add captions to dialogue. So
okay.
yeah, so I'll probably just do that, and then so we have a transcript of it, and then we could, I don't know. So we're not, you know, if we want to have a specific question on how to do something instead of watching 16 hours of footage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a look at how to get that for you and try to get it to you any other way than through Dropbox. See what we can do. What
Fair
about
enough.
things like Google Drive? Have they gone after all?
I would. Yeah, I think everybody gets 20 gigs free of Google Drive. So if you want to do that,
Okay.
I'd have to give you like a personal account and then share it, because I think that's blocked within the government managed environment. So
Okay. Let me take a look at file sizes so far as well.
yeah,
I have no idea yet. So.
Well, your machine's still running, so it hasn't crashed it.
Right. Why
Just
don't I
a
turn off
thought, but would it be able to be shared through Teams? Would that be an option?
I thought you guys already had the option because you were all invited to the meeting. I thought it goes on record in your stuff, but